Alright, for today's Critical Thought, we're going to have a fun topic as we're going to be discussing Upen world design. And no, I didn't mess up that term. As we've seen over the last decade, with the rise of open world style games, a lot of these titles have been borrowing from Ubisoft's playbook, specifically around the Assassin's Creed series, with the big one being Assassin's Creed 2 in 2009. And having played more of Horizon Zero Dawn and really starting to fall out of love with that game, it's become almost its own sense of a trope with these kinds of designs or the Upen world layout. And I want to break things down for you over this video about what that is. So the first part of a Upen world design is the idea of its base game systems. Most games built on Upen world design feature around two main systems. The popular ones would be movement and combat. But we've seen some exceptions to this, such as the stealth elements of Assassin's Creed, driving in Mad Max, the grapple, parachute, whatever we want to call it, of Just Cause, and I'm sure there are more. But typically, movement and combat are the most popular. And what this means is that, from a design point of view, these two systems become the groundwork for all aspects of gameplay, progression, and just simply getting around in the world. And that's a very big point. A few weeks ago, I did a video about emergent game design, and what are the conditions that need to be present in order for that to happen. And this kind of Upen world design is the antithesis of emergent gameplay. In order for emergent design to work, the mechanics have to be very defined, but there must be enough utility or variance that you can use them for to affect things in unpredictable ways. With Upen world design, while the mechanics are rigidly defined, they offer very little in terms of utility or secondary functions. You're essentially dealing with very base systems that are meant to apply to all aspects of the game. A really good example of how this can come or backfire are games that make use of like automatic transversal, dropping down, and how things can get a little bit muddy. Anyone who played Shadow of Mordor probably had trouble quickly or making small gestures like climbing down off of ledges and stuff like that. And part of that reason was you had the same basic movement system that applied to all areas of exploration, stealth, and combat. This is when you get into that ever popular, I'm walking, and then my character just like dives over a ledge without me telling him to do so. But for a lot of these games, while there may be stealth elements to them, the stealth is still rolled into one of the previous two systems. As in, you're not really given unique tools or unique game systems around stealth. Now, there are some exceptions to this, like in the Batman series with what Rocksteady kind of coined as the Apex Predator design, or going back to Assassin's Creed with this whole element of hiding in plain sight. But for the majority of Upen world design games, stealth is kept very bare bones. You can basically hide behind a corner, jump down, attack enemies, and this actually leads into a greater discussion when we come to progression in terms of what this means in terms of stealth gameplay. But when it comes to the progression side of Upen world design, there are two broad categories of how the player or by proxy the character grows in power. The first are new mechanics or gear, which are always tied to story. So if you've played just about any open world game in the last decade, you will always have those situations where the character will pick up a new sword, Batman gets a new gadget, Lara Croft gets a new arrowhead type, stuff like that, and then from that point on, it becomes unlocked for the rest of the game. And typically, these kinds of upgrades are keys used to unlock new areas or find previously inaccessible collectibles. Again, going back to Lara Croft, you had like the grenade arrow, the fire arrow. I think she had a grappling hook or something along those lines, or I may be thinking of some other Upen world style game. But these upgrades are few and far between, and they don't necessarily change what you're doing for the majority of the game, despite unlocking new movesets. Because even though I get the grenade arrow, fire arrow, or pick a Batman gadget, it's the base game systems are still rigidly defined in terms of what you can and can't do. Now, with that said, the second category represents the stat-based or abstracted base progression. And this is a very big point. When it comes to stat-based progression, we're talking about upgrades that don't change or add anything to the game, but simply increase the scale. The best example of this is from pick any ARPG. When I get a rare sword, rare gun, or anything like that, I may be doing additional damage per second, but what I'm doing in the grand scheme of the game doesn't change. I'm clicking the button as fast as I was before, I'm pressing the number key for my skill the same way. It's just the number or the abstraction at play that has changed. And this is a very, and I do mean very, popular element of open world style games. Because what they do is they always start the player very weak in terms of what their options are, what their health is, and even what damage they do. Despite if the character has a lot of movement options or abilities to begin with, such as Alloy in Horizon Zero Dawn, Batman, and the like. So what happens is, as you play through the game, these kinds of incremental or stat-based upgrade systems are usually pretty much unlocked or available to purchase right from the get-go, but there is a passive gate there. And what I mean is that it's not the game saying that you cannot buy this or you cannot buy that, but that the cost of doing so is so high that you're not able to do that right at the start. Or they may require prerequisites, such as, Strong Strike 1, which unlocks Strong Strike 2, which then unlocks Fire Strike, and you get the picture. Some cases they will tie these to story elements, such as in Shadow of War, you could unlock upgrades to your, mind stealing power, whatever we want to call it, until you obviously unlock the ability in story mode. Or the ability to mount certain enemies or mount the certain creatures. But typically, stat-based or incremental-based progression is something that is very popular as essentially a catch-all and relates to all aspects of the base systems. So again, some very popular examples: health upgrades, ammo capacity, damage, secondary resources, and of course going back to stealth. This is one area where things get very tricky in terms of the stat or incremental based progression, because game developers love, and I do mean love, to lock stealth based skills or perks to this progression system. And we can run the gambit here of games. If you've ever played a game where you unlock the ability to do double takedowns, easily kill higher up enemies with stealth attacks, lower your detection, special climbs or distractions, and so on, these are all upgrades that are attached to the system. And this makes things very, I'm not sure, I guess the word would be gamey here. That your character doesn't realize, hey, if I jump down on an enemy, I can attack 2 more. No, we have to upgrade that skill. And this is why stealth becomes a very polarizing part of open world design. Because it's either so weak to be just completely ineffective, or you are just the silent Grim Reaper of the battlefield. I mean, if you played Shadow of War or even Tomb Raider and you fully upgrade your stealth, you can be sniping enemies from a distance, jump down, kill 2 or 3 guys like it's nothing, and basically just completely dominate an entire camp of armed orcs, troops, you name it. And this is one of the issues with this kind of progression, because as we've talked about, what we'll talk about next when in terms of how you actually play the game out, your actual progression becomes very haphazard. You're going to be very weak, but the game is not really balanced around you getting all those upgrades. So what ends up happening is that if you do complete them, you will most likely break the entire experience by the halfway to maybe 3/4 of the way done point. Now, one thing that I didn't mention that I want to bring up here is that typically you will have some kind of universal currency or experience that's used for leveling up your perks or getting new points. And this is usually tied to any good event that you do in the game. Kill an enemy, complete a side quest, complete a main quest, gather resources, buy stuff, anything like that. And this is another way of basically simplifying the progression curve. Basically, instead of having quests give out meaningful rewards or having special things to do, you basically just let everything tie to this universal currency, and you'll essentially be moving forward. But the problem is that you'll reach a point where all those side quests are just useless to you. Because if I'm already at max level or I've unlocked all my perks, why should I do anything else? And that takes me to the next point about Upen world design, and that is the actual content that you're doing. Because this is the biggest point, I think my biggest point of contention when it comes to this kind of design. Because you have this very wide open space, and it seems like with each year, these games get bigger and bigger to explore. But the actual content, the actual things that you're doing, is kept to a small number. And you'll see this in any one of these games, especially the ones that came out recently, like Shadow of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, trying to think of some other really good ones, the Far Cry series, and so on. But you'll see that despite having this wide world, the amount of actual quests or side quest related content is usually categorized into very specific types of things or mini games. In Horizon Zero Dawn, for instance, I've unlocked the hunting minigame, the clear the lair side quests, the destroy the bandit lair side quests, finding the tombs or old ruins, stuff like that. And what goes on is that while this world is very rich and diverse in terms of its environment, in terms of what you're actually doing or impacting, is kept to a minimal. In fact, the only things that you're really doing that will have some sense of an impact are again these side quests. And what happens is that they take this very relatively small number of things to do and just stretch and pad that content out into crazy levels. Anyone who's played a Upen World style game knows what I'm talking about here. Hell, we saw this with Horizon Zero Dawn. We pull up the map and the entire screen is littered with points of interest and things to go to and all that, but it's still only like the same 5 or 6 different categories. And this can become mind-numbing, and it can be someone with OCD. It could be either their nightmare or dream, depending upon how you look at it, with checklist after checklist of things to do. In Mad Max, for instance, the only way you would take over each territory was to perform the same different side content in each area. Tear down these towers, destroy a convoy, enter a bandit or a raider settlement. And again, no matter where you are at in the game, you're still doing the exact same thing over and over again. Going back to the previous point about the progression curve, things are scaling up. You're going to be fighting stronger enemies. You're going to have higher level things to deal with. But what you're doing in those situations is not changing. I'm performing the same stealth attack that I did at the 5th one back there that I'm going to do at the 20th one going forward. And another point about this kind of progression that we've seen in some of these cases is just how abstracted the actual gameplay becomes. And this has to do with how you fight enemies. Because again, it's not about you getting better, but about your character getting better. And the perfect example, and kind of where this kind of ludo-narrative or ludo-mechanical dissonance comes into play, we saw this when I played Horizon Zero Dawn. So I was doing the stream, and we were sneaking up on this archer. I get the perfect shot on his head, take out my bow, aim, do my little Matrix slow-mo, shoot him in the head. And you would think that would kill him. But no, instead of killing him, we see 62 float over his head, and he's still alive. I shot him literally in the face with an arrow, and he shrugs that off. And this is the problem with how rigidly defined these systems are and how heavily they're dependent on that abstracted gameplay, because it makes the game feel more artificial than it needs to be. Now again, if I could kill that guy in one shot with the arrow, then yes, it would be very powerful. But there are ways to get around that. Introduce enemies with helmets. Introduce the fact that maybe I have to do something special to kill them stealthily. But when you're just putting this kind of artificial or this gamey element to it, it robs the game, I think, of that kind of open world or that go where you want, do what you feel kind of expression. And again, going back to what I said earlier, at some point all that breaks down. If I'm using the best weapons and I've crafted all the best weapon parts and all that, it doesn't matter what's going to happen. I'm just going to kill everybody very easily, and then the challenge disappears. And then the last part, we'll wrap things up here, are what I like to call the trimmings. All those little elements that you see in Upen world design, such as climbing towers or some analog that reveals parts of the map. Having to use a fast travel system because the world is so big but there's nothing else in it. The ever popular have to gather resources to heal, but it takes forever to gather them, and then once you get hurt, you spend a lot of them to begin with. The basic enemy design, such as enemy AI who, once they've spotted you and you go into hiding, they completely forget about you. Very basic combat systems. The ever popular complete a race by getting through checkpoints in time, be it with a car, bike, or even just running or climbing. And for those of you watching, can you think of any other open world style tropes that have made their way into these games? Let me know in the comments. But to wrap up today's critical thought, open world design has kind of become like the game design for dummies book for a lot of game developers. And it really, I think, hurts the open world genre, because I was hoping we would see more elevated takes on this. But it seems like everyone is either copying Grand Theft Auto or Assassin's Creed, and that's about it. And there's a lot more we can do with this. I think one of the biggest things that hurt the open world genre is the word open. As I said, the game spaces are getting bigger and bigger with each year and each new iteration, but they're not being filled with any new stuff. They're just repeating the same basic game elements. What I would love to see would be someone do something with like the scale of maybe Yakuza or Shenmue, and then just fill that entire area with all manner of ways for the player to approach combat, approach stealth, different kinds of gameplay elements, and really try to build, again, an emergent open world design. And actually, with that said, can you guys think of any games that did just that? An open world game, so not like a Dwarf Fortress or a strategy kind of game, but have open world and emergent gameplay together. Let me know in the comments, but otherwise, thank you so much for watching today's Critical Thought. If you'd like to suggest a topic for a future one, let me know in the comments below. But otherwise, check back for daily discussions on design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check back around 10 Eastern for regular streaming. If you'd like to suggest games for me to cover or topics to talk about, let me know in the comments below. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on design, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the Game Wisdom Patreon, you can find us on there on patreon.com/gwbicer. $1 will get you into our private Discord channel where we talk game topics and more. $5 will get you voting privileges for any major event, including the Saturday Night Grab Bag, Patreon-funded goals, and more. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you enjoy more videos here on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel.